This week on Ask an Expert, alt history. Welcome to Ask an Expert, the show where you submit questions to be answered by people around the school. I'm your host, Kieran Lanois. This week on Ask an Expert, our question is, what if Nazis had won World War II? Here to answer our question is Mr. Brown, one of our history teachers. Hello, can you help us answer this question?
Yes, absolutely. So in considering this kind of question, it's always exciting historically to consider the what ifs. What if the South had won Gettysburg? What if the Industrial Revolution had happened in a country other than Britain? And so in this case, it's always... in this case, not so much exciting as horrifying to talk about the idea of what if the Nazis had won. But just some things that my research and thinking about it kind of occurred to me are one of the first things that would likely happen is that Hitler would annex some of the Nordic Scandinavian countries because they would very much fit in with his racial theories of, the perfect person, the Aryan person. Certainly in terms of land, he would probably be looking to retain some of the colonies that the Germans had lost in World War I, as well as all of that space into the Soviet Union, which he would have called Lebensraum, or the living space for the German people. In his writings, he had called it the living space. One of the likely moves he may have made as well socially would be to perhaps eliminate Christianity. Because one of the things that we did see in the Soviet Union is that sometimes these totalitarian governments don't really want a moral force to be there to guide the people. They want to be the force that's
totalitarian.
Guiding.
Completely.
Absolutely. One of the things that, of course, and again, it's horrifying to think about it, is that the Holocaust would have being ramped up even more because the reality was they were killing people at an industrial level in the last days of the World War II, and if they didn't have the war to be focusing their resources on, they would be able to focus it on the Jewish people even more. And so certainly it would be quite a horrifying thing for those people. And then lastly, another group that would certainly be looking to have some ill treatment would be the Eastern European, the Slavic people, because Hitler felt that they were subhuman, and there was a lot of the Eastern Europeans that were eventually put into mines and factories to work as slave labor. And certainly, that would probably continue at a large level at that point.
Well, now looking from across the pond, now these are countries, the US, Canada, what would we have done if they won Britain, France, and Spain and went all the way and won Europe? What would we have done?
Well, likely I think we would probably tighten our alliance with the United States. Because, of course, one of the advantages is that we had an ocean separating us, and so that would certainly make any invasion a lot more challenging. Certainly, if it ever did come to a point where the Germans were to invade North America, I'm sure the United States and Canada would work very closely to defend both of our countries, as we have, even up until today, very closely aligned ourselves in terms of North American defense.
Now, looking at the other ocean, now what would Hitler have planned for the southeastern Asian countries?
Well, it's a great question because certainly if the Japanese Empire had stayed intact, it eventually may have come down to a showdown at one point about who would be the dominant world power, and I can't see either of those two kind of empires being willing to tolerate not being the dominant kind of power, and so eventually there may have been a showdown between them as well.
Now we're looking at alternate reality, so let's go on the thing that the U.S. bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima.
Right.
What nuclear powers would be faced by Germany, and how would Germany react to that?
Well, certainly we know from history that Germany was trying to develop their own bomb. They were far behind the Americans in terms of that, but certainly it was in their concept. And one of the terrifying things, of course, is that they had developed such superior rocket technology at that point. The idea of putting some kind of a nuclear weapon on a rocket at that point would be pretty terrifying. But certainly, if the United States was able to develop their nuclear technology, we might have seen a point where the United States would drop an atomic weapon on Germany to try to force some kind of a peace or try to eliminate them as a world threat.
Well, looking at this horrifying alternate reality, I think it's very good to remember the soldiers that did fight for our freedom so this wouldn't happen. I think it's very good that we talk about what they've done and what they've sacrificed. So
yes, absolutely.
Thank you for answering.
Thank you.
Yep. That's it for this week's Ask an Expert. But we're always looking for new questions. Tweet them at PA Carlton with the hashtag Ask an Expert, and we'll find someone who can answer them for you. See you next week.